a single dad found a crying single mother nurse collapsed in the rain. He had no idea she'd lost her home, her job, and everyone she loved. But there was one thing she still had. Watch till the end. This might be the most beautiful story ever told on Mr. Peter Stories. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. I'm your temporary host, James Peters. Many of you already know me. I've stood beside my brother, Mr. Peters, for years, but today I'm here for a deeper reason. Mr. Peters is not well, and he needs your love, your prayers, and your presence more than ever. I've seen the pain in his eyes. He feels forgotten. But I know the truth. This family is strong. You've lifted him before, and I believe you'll do it again. I pray that your heart finds peace. Your home is filled with love, and your soul is protected from every storm. May blessings fall upon you like gentle rain, and may you always feel the warmth of God's grace. If this story touches your heart, please like and leave a comment for Mr. Peters, for his healing, for his strength. And before you go, comment these powerful words. We are all standing for Mr. Peters. The rain fell like tears from heaven, each drop carrying the weight of despair as it crashed against the windshield of Red Brown's midnight blue Bentley. Lightning split the darkened sky, illuminating the empty streets of downtown Seattle in violent flashes of silver and white. Red gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white against the leather as thunder rolled across the city like nature's own symphony of sorrow. At 35, Red had built an empire from nothing. Brown Tech Industries stood as a testament to his relentless drive, its gleaming towers reaching toward the clouds like fingers grasping for dreams. But tonight, after another 14-hour day of board meetings and profit margins, all he felt was the familiar emptiness that had consumed him since Isabella's death 2 years ago. His auburn hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit worth more than most people's cars, yet inside he felt hollow. "Daddy will be home soon, little man," he whispered to the empty car, thinking of 7-year-old Paul waiting at the mansion with Mrs. Valencia. Paul, with his mother's gentle eyes and Raid's stubborn chin, was the only light left in Red's carefully controlled world. But even that light seemed dimmed lately, as if the boy sensed his father's heart was still trapped in a prison of grief. Rad's thoughts were interrupted by a flash of movement in his peripheral vision. Through the torrential downpour, he glimpsed a figure huddled on a park bench beneath the flickering streetlight. His first instinct was to drive past. Seattle had plenty of homeless souls, and Reed's charity work was conducted through proper channels, not impulse encounters in the rain. But something made him slow the Bentley to a crawl. The figure wasn't moving, not the restless shifting of someone seeking shelter, but the absolute stillness of someone who had simply given up. Reed's chest tightened as he pulled to the curb, hazard lights casting an amber glow through the storm. He sat for a moment, watching, waiting for some sign of life from the motionless form. Then the lightning struck again, and in that brilliant instant, Red saw her clearly. Love Angel. Though he didn't know her name yet, didn't know the story written in her tears, he saw everything he needed to see in that split second of illumination. A woman, young and beautiful despite the rain-soaked despair that clung to her like a shroud. Her dark skin glistened with raindrops that caught the streetlight like liquid diamonds. Her hair, once probably styled with care, now hung in wet tendrils around a face that spoke of strength, brought to its knees by circumstances beyond her control. She wore scrubs, faded blue medical scrubs that marked her as someone who spent her life caring for others. In her hands, she clutched what looked like papers, holding them as if they contained her entire world. Her shoulders shook, though whether from cold or sobs, Raid couldn't tell from this distance. Something deep in his chest cracked open, not breaking, but awakening. This woman, sitting alone in a storm that seemed determined to wash away everything she had left, called to something in his soul that had been dormant since Isabella's funeral. Red didn't think. He simply acted. Grabbing his umbrella from the passenger seat, he stepped out into the fury of the storm. The rain immediately soaked through his expensive suit, but he barely noticed. His Italian leather shoes splashed through puddles as he approached the bench, each step feeling like destiny guiding his path. "Ma'am?" His voice was gentle, barely audible above the thunder. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Love Angel looked up, and Red felt his breath catch in his throat. Her eyes were liquid gold, filled with a pain so profound it seemed to echo his own. Tears mixed with raindrops on her cheeks, and her lips, full and beautiful even in despair, trembled as she tried to form words. She began, then stopped, her voice breaking like glass against stone. "I'm fine. Please, just leave me alone." But Red saw the papers in her hands more clearly now. A termination letter from Seattle General Hospital, an eviction notice stamped with angry red ink, and beneath those, barely visible but unmistakably present, custody documents that made his heart ache with recognition. "You're not fine," he said softly, opening his umbrella to shield them both from the worst of the downpour. "And that's okay. Nobody should have to be fine all the time." Love Angel stared up at this stranger, this man in an expensive suit who had stopped his luxury car to check on a broken woman in the rain. His eyes were kind, the color of autumn leaves, and there was something in his voice that spoke of understanding rather than pity. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm. "I've lost everything. My job, my home, Her voice cracked completely. "My son. They took my son." Reed's heart shattered and mended itself in the space of a heartbeat. He knelt down in front of the bench, not caring that his knees were now soaked and muddy, bringing himself to her eye level. "I'm Red," he said simply. "Reed Brown. And I think maybe I understand more than you know." "Love Angel," she replied automatically, then immediately looked away as if ashamed of her own name. "Love Angel," Red repeated, and somehow when he said it, the name sounded like a prayer instead of an embarrassment. "That's the most beautiful name I've ever heard." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's stupid. My grandmother named me that because she said I was sent from heaven to bring love to a broken world. But look at me now. I can't even take care of myself, let alone bring love to anyone." Reed stood slowly, extending his hand toward her. "Maybe your grandmother was right. Maybe you just haven't met the broken world that needs your love yet." Love Angel stared at his outstretched hand, strong, capable, unmarked by the kind of hardship that had carved lines of struggle into her own palms. This man, with his perfect hair and expensive clothes, lived in a different universe from hers. What could he possibly want with a woman who had nothing left to give? "I can't," she whispered. "I don't have anywhere to go, anything to offer. I'm nobody." "You're somebody to me," Reed said, and the sincerity in his voice made her look up again. "And right now, you're somebody who needs shelter from this storm. Let me help you, please." Thunder crashed overhead, and Love Angel felt the papers in her hands dissolving in the rain, the last tangible evidence of her old life washing away like ink in water. She looked at this stranger who had appeared in her darkest moment like some kind of miracle, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope. When she placed her trembling hand in his, Reed felt something shift in the universe. This woman, whose name spoke of divine love, whose eyes held depths of pain and strength he was only beginning to understand, was about to change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. "You don't have to carry this alone, beautiful soul," he whispered, helping her to her feet as lightning painted the sky in brilliant white. "I promise you're safe with me." Love Angel swayed slightly, exhaustion and hunger finally overcoming her pride. Red caught her gently, his arm strong and steady around her waist, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt protected instead of afraid. As he guided her toward his car, umbrella shielding them both from the storm, Love Angel wondered if perhaps her grandmother had been right, after all. Maybe she really was an angel, but maybe she wasn't meant to save someone else. Maybe she was meant to be saved. The rain continued to fall as Red helped her into the warm sanctuary of his car, but somehow it no longer felt like the end of the world. It felt like the beginning of something impossible and beautiful, a love story written in the language of storms and second chances. Chapter 2. Sanctuary in Stranger's Kindness. The Bentley glided through the storm-darkened streets like a ship navigating troubled waters, its leather interior cocooning Love Angel in warmth she hadn't felt in months. She sat carefully in the passenger seat, acutely aware of how her wet scrubs might damage the pristine upholstery, how her presence seemed foreign in this perfect space that clearly belonged to someone from an entirely different world. Reed kept stealing glances at her as he drove, noting how she held herself with careful dignity despite her circumstances, how her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her wet hair away from her face. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was heavy with unspoken questions and the weight of her gratitude. "Where are we going?" Love Angel finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Home," Red replied simply, then quickly added, "My home. You need somewhere safe to get warm and dry, and I have plenty of space." Love Angel's defenses immediately rose. "I can't. I don't even know you. For all I know, you could be a dangerous stranger who rescues women from park benches in the rain." Rad's voice held a gentle humor that somehow put her at ease. "I suppose that is a fair concern. Would it help if I told you I have a 7-year-old son? Dangerous men don't usually travel with children." Something in his voice when he mentioned his son made Love Angel look at him more carefully. There was love there, deep and profound, but also a sadness that mirrored her own. "What happened to his mother?" she asked softly. Red's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "Car accident, 2 years ago." He paused, then added, "Her name was Isabella." "I'm sorry," Love Angel whispered, and she meant it. The pain in those 3 simple words told her everything she needed to know about this man's character. He understood loss. He understood what it meant to have your world shattered in an instant. They drove in contemplative silence for several more minutes before Reed turned onto a private road that wound through towering evergreens. Love Angel's breath caught when the trees gave way to reveal a sprawling lakeside mansion that looked like something from a fairy tale. Warm golden light spilled from dozens of windows, reflecting off the lake's surface even through the rain. Gardens that probably looked magnificent in daylight stretched toward the water, and a circular driveway curved gracefully in front of the elegant entrance. "This is your home," Love Angel breathed, unable to hide her awe. "Paul and I ramble around in here like 2 lost souls," Red said with a self-deprecating smile. "It's too big for just the 2 of us, but Isabella loved it. She said it felt like a place where families could grow and be happy." Love Angel felt tears threatening again. This beautiful home, this obviously wealthy and kind man. What was he doing rescuing a broken woman from a park bench? "I don't belong here," she whispered. Red parked the car and turned to face her fully. "Love Angel, listen to me. I don't know your whole story yet, and you don't know mine. But I know what I saw back there, a woman who's fighting battles that would have destroyed weaker people. That tells me exactly the kind of person you are, and that kind of person always belongs wherever kindness lives." Before Love Angel could protest further, the front door of the mansion burst open, and a small figure came running out despite the rain. A little boy with auburn hair and bright blue eyes launched himself toward the car, clearly overjoyed that his father was finally home. "That's Paul," Reed said, his whole face lighting up with love. "He's been waiting for me to get home from my business trip for 3 days." Love Angel watched through the rain-streaked window as Red stepped out and swept the little boy into his arms, both of them laughing as they got soaked. The pure joy on both their faces made her chest ache with longing for her own son, Aspen, who was probably tucked into bed somewhere across the country, believing his mother had abandoned him. When Red opened her car door, Paul was right beside him, peering at her with open curiosity rather than suspicion. "Daddy, who's the pretty lady?" Love Angel felt her cheeks warm at the innocent compliment. "Hello," she said softly, stepping out into the rain. "This is Miss Love Angel," Red told his son. "She needs somewhere warm and safe to stay tonight." Paul studied her for a moment with the serious consideration that only children possess, then suddenly smiled, a radiant expression that transformed his whole face. "Love Angel is the prettiest name ever. It sounds like something from one of my storybooks." Despite everything, Love Angel found herself smiling for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Paul. That's very kind of you to say. Come on." Paul grabbed her hand with the casual acceptance that children showed toward anyone they deemed worthy of trust. "Mrs. Valencia made hot chocolate, and it's the best in the whole world." Love Angel allowed herself to be pulled toward the house, Red walking beside them with an expression of wonder on his face. When they reached the covered entryway, a plump, motherly woman with graying hair and kind eyes appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Reed, you're soaked through," the woman scolded. Then her gaze fell on Love Angel. Her expression immediately softened with understanding. "And you've brought someone who needs taking care of." "Mrs. Valencia, this is Love Angel," Red said. "Love Angel, this is Mrs. Valencia. She keeps us all fed and sane around here." Mrs. Valencia stepped forward and gently took Love Angel's arm. "Come in, dear. Let's get you warm and dry before you catch your death." Love Angel found herself swept into a foyer that belonged in a palace, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a curved staircase that seemed to float up to the second floor. But despite its grandeur, the space felt warm and lived in. Children's drawings were displayed on an ornate side table. Family photos lined the walls, and Paul's backpack sat abandoned by the door, where he'd clearly dropped it after school. "I can't stay," Love Angel said suddenly, panic setting in as the full weight of her situation hit her. "This is too much. You've already done more than enough, and I can't impose on your family like this." She turned toward the door, but Paul's small voice stopped her in her tracks. "Please don't go, Miss Love Angel." She looked down to find the little boy gazing up at her with eyes that held a wisdom far beyond his years. "Everyone who comes here always leaves," he said quietly. "Daddy tries to help people, but they always leave. Please don't leave too." Love Angel's heart shattered at the raw honesty in his voice. She knelt down to his level, ignoring the puddle her wet clothes were creating on the marble floor. "Oh, sweetheart, it's not that I want to leave. It's just that I don't have anything to give back to you and your daddy. I've lost everything." Paul considered this with the same serious expression he'd worn outside. Then he reached out and gently touched her cheek where a tear had escaped. "Daddy says that sometimes angels look sad because they carry everyone else's happiness inside them. Maybe you're not here to give us something. Maybe you're here so we can give you something." Red stood frozen in place, watching this extraordinary exchange between his son and this woman who had appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers he hadn't even realized he'd been praying. Love Angel's eyes filled with fresh tears, but these weren't tears of despair. They were tears of something that might have been hope. "How did you get so wise?" she whispered to Paul. "Daddy reads me lots of books," Paul replied seriously. And Mrs. Valencia tells me stories about angels who forget they're angels sometimes. Mrs. Valencia stepped forward, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Mr. Reed, why don't you get Miss Love Angel some dry clothes while I fix her something to eat? She looks like she hasn't had a proper meal in days. Love Angel started to protest, but Red raised a gentle hand. Please, he said, let us take care of you tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out everything else, but tonight, just let yourself be safe. The word safe broke something inside Love Angel's chest. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly safe. Even before everything fell apart with Damien, even during the good times, there had always been an undercurrent of tension, of walking on eggshells, of being one mistake away from losing everything she cared about. But standing in this warm, beautiful home with a man who asked for nothing but the chance to help, and a child who saw angels in broken strangers, Love Angel felt something she'd thought was lost forever. She felt hope. Okay, she whispered, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of complete surrender. Just for tonight. Paul cheered and clapped his hands, and Mrs. Valencia beamed as she bustled away toward what Love Angel assumed was the kitchen. Red stepped closer, and she caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive but not overwhelming, with hints of cedar and rain. Just for tonight, he agreed softly, though something in his eyes suggested he was already hoping for much, much longer. Chapter 3. Walls begin to crumble. 3 weeks had passed since that storm-soaked night, and Love Angel had somehow found herself woven into the fabric of the Brown household in ways she never could have imagined. What was supposed to be one night of sanctuary had stretched into something that felt dangerously close to belonging, a feeling she'd trained herself not to trust. The guest wing of the mansion had become her temporary haven, elegantly appointed with a sitting area, private bathroom, and a bedroom that was larger than any apartment she'd ever lived in. Each morning she woke to the sound of Paul's laughter, echoing through the halls, and the gentle bustle of Mrs. Valencia preparing breakfast. And for those first drowsy moments before reality set in, Love Angel could almost pretend this was her real life. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. She was here on borrowed time and borrowed kindness, a charity case that Red had taken in out of the goodness of his heart. The reminder was a constant ache in her chest, even as she found herself falling deeper under the spell of this family that had welcomed her so completely. This particular morning found Love Angel in the sunlit breakfast nook, helping Paul with his homework while Mrs. Valencia hummed Spanish lullabies in the kitchen. Paul had taken to her with the easy affection of a child starved for maternal attention, and she discovered that his bright mind was matched by a gentle soul that reminded her heartbreakingly of her own Aspen. Miss Love Angel, what's a metaphor again? Paul asked, chewing on the end of his pencil as he studied his English worksheet. A metaphor is when you compare two things by saying one thing is another, Love Angel explained patiently. Like saying her voice is music or his heart is a stone. Paul nodded seriously, then looked up at her with those perceptive blue eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. What metaphor would you use for Daddy? The question caught Love Angel off guard. She glanced toward the doorway where she could see Reed in his study, already dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, his auburn hair catching the morning light as he reviewed documents for his day at the office. Even after 3 weeks of living in his home, the sight of him still made her breath catch. I don't know, she said softly. What metaphor would you use? Paul considered this with the gravity of someone solving the world's problems. I think Daddy is like a lighthouse, he said finally. He stands really tall and strong, and he helps lost people find their way home, but he's kind of lonely up there all by himself. Love Angel felt tears prick her eyes at the wisdom in the 7-year-old's words. That's a beautiful metaphor, Paul. What about you? Paul asked, tilting his head. What metaphor are you? Before Love Angel could answer, Reed appeared in the doorway, briefcase in hand and car keys jangling. "What are we discussing this morning?" he asked, his voice carrying that warm tone he reserved for moments with his son. "Metaphors," Paul announced. "I said you're a lighthouse, and I was asking Miss Love Angel what she is." Reed's gaze shifted to Love Angel, and she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach that she'd been trying so hard to ignore. 3 weeks of living under the same roof had done nothing to diminish the effect he had on her. If anything, seeing him in unguarded moments with Paul, witnessing his kindness to Mrs. Valencia, watching him work late into the night on projects that would benefit others, had only deepened her growing feelings for him. "I think," Red said quietly, never taking his eyes off Love Angel, "that some metaphors are too beautiful and complex for simple words." The air in the breakfast nook suddenly felt charged with something unspoken, and Love Angel found herself drowning in the depths of Reed's autumn-colored eyes. She forced herself to look away, focusing on Paul's worksheet as heat crept up her neck. "Daddy, are you going to work again today?" Paul asked, breaking the tension with the innocent directness of childhood. "I have to, buddy," Red said, ruffling his son's hair. "But I'll be home for dinner and maybe we can work on that model airplane afterward." "Can Miss Love Angel help too?" Paul asked hopefully. "If she'd like to," Reed replied, though his tone suggested he very much hoped she would. After Reed left for the office, Love Angel threw herself into the routine that had developed over the past weeks. She helped Paul get ready for school, walking him to the bus stop at the end of the long driveway and waving until the yellow vehicle disappeared around the bend. Mrs. Valencia had gently but firmly insisted that Love Angel didn't need to help with household duties, but she'd found small ways to contribute, organizing Paul's toys, helping with meal preparation, tending to the neglected herb garden behind the kitchen. It was in that garden, kneeling among the overgrown basil and rosemary plants, that Love Angel allowed herself to truly think about her situation. Reed had gently suggested that she consider his offer to serve as Paul's private tutor and caregiver, a position that would provide her with income, purpose, and a legitimate reason to stay. The salary he'd mentioned was more than generous, enough to begin building a new life and perhaps even start the legal proceedings to regain custody of Aspen. But accepting would mean admitting that this wasn't temporary. It would mean allowing herself to hope for a future she wasn't sure she deserved. The sound of car tires on gravel interrupted her thoughts. Love Angel looked up, surprised to see Reed's Bentley pulling into the driveway. It was barely noon. What was he doing home so early? She brushed the dirt from her hands and walked toward the house, finding Red in the kitchen with Mrs. Valencia, his tie loosened and his usually perfect hair slightly mussed. "Is everything all right?" Love Angel asked, concern evident in her voice. Red looked up, and the stress lines around his eyes softened when he saw her. "Just needed to come home for a bit," he said. "Sometimes the office feels like a cage." Mrs. Valencia clucked her tongue sympathetically. "You work too hard, Mr. Reed. It's not good for a man to spend all his time making money and none of it making memories." "I know," Reed said wearily. "It's just, since Isabella died, work has been the only thing that made sense. The only thing I could control." Love Angel felt her heart clench at the pain in his voice. Without thinking, she stepped closer. "Would you like some coffee? Or maybe some of that soup Mrs. Valencia made yesterday?" Red's eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker there. Gratitude, but also something deeper. Something that made her pulse quicken. "Actually, would you mind if we sat on the terrace for a bit? I feel like I've been breathing stale air all morning." The terrace overlooked the lake with comfortable seating arranged to take advantage of the stunning view. Love Angel settled into one of the cushioned chairs while Red loosened his tie completely and sat across from her, looking more human and less like the polished businessman she was used to seeing. "You know, I used to bring Isabella out here when she was having a bad day," Riyadh said, his gaze fixed on the water. "She'd sit right where you're sitting and tell me about her dreams, opening a foundation for underprivileged children, traveling to places we'd only seen in books, growing old together, watching our grandchildren play in this very garden." Love Angel's throat tightened. "She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was," Red agreed. "But she's been gone for 2 years, and I've been so focused on preserving her memory that I forgot how to live in the present." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the gentle lapping of the lake water and the distant call of birds the only sounds. Love Angel found herself studying Red's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he wasn't careful about styling it, the sadness that seemed to live in the corners of his eyes. "Can I ask you something?" Red said suddenly. "Of course. What happened with your son's father? You don't have to tell me if it's too painful, but I've seen the way you look sometimes when you think no one's watching. Like you're carrying a weight that's too heavy for one person to bear." Love Angel felt her defenses rising instinctively, but something about the gentle way Red asked, the genuine concern in his voice, made her walls begin to crumble. "His name is Damien," she said quietly. "We were married for 4 years, and at first I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. He was charming, successful, everything I thought I wanted." She paused, gathering courage to continue. "But charm can hide a lot of darkness. The emotional abuse started small, little comments about my appearance, my intelligence, my worth. Then it escalated to financial control. He managed all our money, made all the decisions, slowly isolated me from my friends and family until he was my entire world." Rad's hands clenched into fists, but he remained silent, letting her speak. "When I finally found the courage to leave and file for divorce, he launched a campaign to destroy me. He had better lawyers, more money, more connections. He painted me as an unfit mother, claimed I was unstable, dangerous. The final blow was when I lost my job and apartment in the same week. The court decided Aspen would be better off with his father until I could prove I was capable of providing a stable home." Tears were streaming down Love Angel's face now, but she pressed on. "That night you found me, I had just gotten the final custody ruling. I lost my son, my home, my job, everything that mattered to me. I was ready to just disappear." Red was out of his chair and kneeling beside her before she'd finished speaking, his hands gentle on her face as he wiped away her tears. "Love Angel, I am so sorry. No one should have to endure what you've been through." "I'm broken, Red," she whispered. "I'm not the kind of woman who belongs in a place like this, with a man like you. I'm just damaged goods." Red's eyes blazed with an intensity that took her breath away. "Don't you ever say that about yourself again," he said fiercely. "You're not broken. You're not damaged. You're the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. What that man did to you, what the system did to you, that's not who you are. That's what happened to you. There's a difference." Love Angel stared at him, seeing her own reflection in his eyes and realizing that when he looked at her, he didn't see a victim or a charity case. He saw someone worth fighting for. For the first time since that night in the rain, Love Angel allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was worth saving after all. Chapter 4. Hearts Learning to Trust. The morning sun streamed through Love Angel's bedroom window, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor as she woke to find a small gift waiting outside her door. A perfectly brewed cup of her favorite coffee and a single white rose with a note written in Reed's distinctive handwriting. For someone who brings light to dark places. It had been happening for a week now, these small gestures that made her heart flutter and her defenses crumble bit by bit. Monday had been a book of poetry by Maya Angelou, with several passages underlined in pencil. Tuesday brought a silk scarf the exact shade of honey gold that matched her eyes, so soft it felt like a whisper against her skin. Wednesday was a playlist of songs that seemed chosen specifically for her, music that spoke of healing, hope, and second chances. Love. Angel tried to tell herself that Red was simply being kind, that this was how wealthy people showed gratitude to their employees. But the way he looked at her during their increasingly frequent conversations, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way he seemed to appear whenever she needed help with something, it all pointed to feelings that went far beyond professional courtesy. And that terrified her. She dressed carefully in one of the simple but elegant dresses that Mrs. Valencia had somehow procured for her. Another kindness in a household that seemed built on them, and made her way downstairs to find Paul already at the breakfast table, chattering excitedly about his upcoming science project. "Miss Love Angel, Daddy said you used to work in a hospital and that you know all about how the human body works." Paul's eyes were bright with enthusiasm. "Will you help me with my project about the heart?" "Of course," Love Angel replied, settling into her usual chair and accepting the plate of perfectly prepared eggs Benedict that Mrs. Valencia placed before her. "What specifically do you want to know about the heart?" "Well, Mrs. Martinez said we have to explain how it works, but I want to know why sometimes hearts hurt even when they're not broken," Paul said with the earnest curiosity of childhood. "Like how Daddy's heart hurt after Mommy went to heaven, or how your heart hurts when you miss someone." Love Angel felt her breath catch at the innocent question, glancing toward the doorway where Reed stood, clearly having overheard the conversation. He was dressed for another day at the office, but something in his expression suggested his mind was already far from business concerns. "That's a very thoughtful question, Paul," Love Angel said carefully. "The heart that pumps our blood and the heart that feels emotions are different things, but they're connected in ways that doctors are still trying to understand. Is that why sometimes when I miss Mommy really bad, my chest feels tight?" Paul asked. Reed stepped into the breakfast nook, his usual morning routine forgotten as he sat down beside his son. "Yes, buddy. That's exactly right. Sometimes emotional pain can feel physical too. But Miss Love Angel makes that feeling better," Paul announced with the straightforward honesty of a 7-year-old. "When she reads me stories or helps with my homework, the tight feeling goes away. Is that because she's fixing my heart?" The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions. Love Angel felt Red's gaze on her, intense and searching, while Paul looked between the two adults with the expectant expression of someone waiting for an answer to what seemed like a perfectly reasonable question. "I think," Love Angel said quietly, "that hearts can help heal other hearts. When people care about each other, when they're kind and present and patient, it can help the hurting become less." Red's eyes never left her face as she spoke, and she saw something shift in his expression. A recognition, perhaps, of truths that neither of them had been ready to voice. After Paul left for school, Love Angel found herself alone with Red for the first time in days. He lingered in the kitchen, making a show of checking his phone and gathering his papers, but she could sense his reluctance to leave. "Reed," she said softly, and he looked up immediately. "Thank you. For the gifts, I mean. They're beautiful, but you don't need to." "I want to," he interrupted, stepping closer. "I want to give you beautiful things, Love Angel. You deserve beautiful things." The intensity in his voice made her pulse quicken. "I don't understand why you're being so kind to me. I'm just someone you found in the rain. I haven't done anything to earn this." Reed moved closer still, until she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something that was purely him. "You don't earn kindness, Love Angel. You don't earn care or compassion or..." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. You don't earn the way someone makes you feel like the world has color again after you'd forgotten what anything but gray looked like. Love. Angel's breath caught. Reed, I know you're not ready to hear this, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know you're still healing, still fighting battles that I can't fully understand. But I need you to know that these gifts, this care, it's not charity, it's not pity. It's because when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary, someone who survived hell and came out with her compassion intact, someone who loves my son like he's her own and makes this house feel like a home again. Before Love Angel could respond, the sound of a car door slamming outside made them both freeze. Through the kitchen window, they could see a man getting out of a rental car, tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of cold determination. Love Angel's face went white. No, she whispered. It can't be. Who is it? Reed asked, but he was already moving toward the window, his protective instincts clearly activated. It's Damien, Love Angel said, her voice barely audible. It's my ex-husband. The man strode toward the front door with the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation and force of will. Even from a distance, Love Angel could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he assessed the mansion's value and grandeur with the practiced gaze of someone always looking for leverage. Reed's entire demeanor changed in an instant. The gentle, thoughtful man who had been speaking words of affection became something harder, more formidable. This was the businessman who had built an empire from nothing, the man who didn't lose fights that mattered to him. Stay here, he told Love Angel, his voice carrying an authority she'd never heard before. No, Reed, you don't understand. He's dangerous when he doesn't get what he wants. He'll say things, make threats. Then he'll discover what happens when someone threatens my family, Reed said, and the quiet steel in his voice made Love Angel's heart skip for entirely different reasons. The doorbell rang, its melodious chime seeming ominous in the current circumstances. Love Angel heard Mrs. Valencia's footsteps in the foyer, heard her polite but cautious voice asking how she could help the visitor. I'm here to see my wife, Damien's voice carried through the house, smooth and commanding. I believe she's staying here. Ex-wife, Reed said as he strode toward the front door, Love Angel following despite his instructions to stay put. And she's not staying here. She lives here. Love Angel reached the foyer just as Reed opened the door, placing himself squarely between Damien and the interior of the house. Her ex-husband looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a cold, calculated way, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of getting his way through manipulation and intimidation. Damien, she said, and hated how small her own voice sounded. Angel, he replied, using the shortened version of her name that had always made her skin crawl. His eyes swept past Reed to take in the opulent surroundings, and she saw the wheels turning in his mind, calculating new ways to use this information against her. I see you've landed on your feet. I always said you were resourceful when it came to finding someone to take care of you. That's enough, Rad said, his voice carrying a warning that even Damien seemed to recognize. And you are? Damien asked, though his tone suggested he already knew exactly who Red was and had probably done extensive research before showing up. I'm Red Brown. This is my home and Love Angel is under my protection. Damien's smile was sharp as a blade. Protection? From what? I'm her husband. Ex-husband, both Reed and Love Angel said simultaneously. Technically, yes, Damien conceded with the air of someone making a minor correction. But I'm also the father of her child, which gives me certain rights and concerns about the environment my son's mother is choosing to live in. The threat was subtle but unmistakable, and Love Angel felt her blood turn to ice. What do you want, Damien? I want to talk to my wife, ex-wife, privately. I think we have some things to discuss about Aspen's welfare and her current living situation. Anything you have to say to Love Angel can be said in front of me, Red stated firmly. Damien's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. How chivalrous. But I think Angel and I both know that our business is between us. After all, we wouldn't want any misunderstandings about her past to create complications for her new arrangement here. The implied blackmail hit Love Angel like a physical blow. Damien hadn't changed at all. He was still the master manipulator who could turn any situation to his advantage, still the predator who fed on others' vulnerabilities. But then Rad stepped forward, and something in his posture made Damien actually take a step back. "Let me make something very clear," Rad said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "Love Angel is a member of my family now. My son adores her, my household respects her, and I—" He paused, his eyes finding Love Angel's for just a moment. "I care about her more than I have words to express, so if you think you're going to come to my home and threaten or intimidate her, you've severely miscalculated." "Is that so?" Damien's voice was silky with threat. "And what exactly do you plan to do about it, Mr. Brown?" Red smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm going to call my head of security, Marcus, who should be here in about 3 minutes. Then I'm going to have you escorted off my property. And if you come back without legal representation and a court order, I'm going to have you arrested for trespassing and harassment." As if summoned by his words, a large, serious-looking man in a dark suit appeared in the driveway, walking toward the house with the purposeful stride of someone prepared for trouble. Damien's confident facade flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "This isn't over, Angel. You can't hide from your responsibilities forever. Aspen needs his mother, and I need financial adjustments to our arrangement." "Get off my property," Rad said, and there was nothing civilized left in his voice. "Now." As Marcus approached, Damien apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. He backed toward his car, but not before delivering a parting shot. "Enjoy playing house, Angel. But remember, I know who you really are. And when your new protector figures it out too, you'll come crawling back just like you always do." Love Angel felt tears threatening as Damien drove away, his words echoing in her mind like poison. Red turned to her immediately, his fierce protectiveness giving way to gentle concern. "Are you all right?" "No," she whispered, and then she was in his arms, sobbing against his chest while he held her tight and murmured words of comfort and strength. For the first time since this nightmare began, Love Angel allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Chapter 5. The Dance of Souls. 2 weeks had passed since Damien's unwelcome visit, and while there had been no further contact from him, Love Angel couldn't shake the feeling that he was circling like a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Raid had immediately contacted his legal team and hired additional security for the estate, but the shadow of threat still lingered over what had become the happiest weeks of Love Angel's adult life. Tonight, however, those shadows seemed pushed back by the golden glow of anticipation. Reed had asked her to accompany him to the annual Brown Tech Industries Charity Gala, an event that would raise funds for children's hospitals throughout the Pacific Northwest. When he'd first mentioned it, Love Angel had immediately declined, terrified of being thrust into Red's high society world, where she was certain she wouldn't belong. It was Paul who had changed her mind. "Please, Miss Love Angel," he had begged, bouncing on his toes with excitement. "Daddy never asks anyone to go to his fancy parties with him. Mrs. Valencia says it's because he's been too sad since Mommy died, but you make him smile again, and you'll look like a princess." How could she refuse such earnest pleading? Especially when she'd seen the hope in Reed's eyes when he'd asked, the way he'd tried to hide his disappointment when she'd initially said no. Now, standing before the full-length mirror in her room, Love Angel barely recognized herself. The gown Red had somehow procured was nothing short of magnificent, a deep sapphire blue that brought out the golden flecks in her eyes, with a flowing skirt that made her feel like she was wrapped in starlight. Mrs. Valencia had helped with her hair, sweeping it into an elegant updo that showcased the delicate diamond earrings that had appeared on her pillow, with yet another note from Red. For someone who outshines every star. A soft knock at her door made her heart flutter. "Come in," she called, turning from the mirror. Red stepped into the room and stopped dead in his tracks, his lips parting slightly as he took in the sight of her. He was devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face, pure, unguarded amazement, that took her breath away. "Love Angel," he breathed, and the reverence in his voice made her feel like the most beautiful woman who had ever lived. I don't have words." "You don't look too bad yourself," she said softly, fighting the urge to smooth an imaginary wrinkle from his perfect jacket, just for an excuse to touch him. "These are for you," Reed said, producing a velvet jewelry box from behind his back. Inside lay a necklace that made Love Angel gasp, a delicate platinum chain with a pendant shaped like an angel's wing, set with diamonds that caught the light like captured raindrops. "Reed, I can't accept this. It's too much." "Nothing is too much for you," he said, stepping behind her to fasten the necklace himself. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck as he worked the clasp, and Love Angel had to grip the back of a chair to keep her knees from buckling. "Besides, it was my grandmother's. She always said it should go to the woman who brings light back to our family." Love Angel touched the pendant gently, feeling the weight of its significance. "Your grandmother's. Her name was Grace," Reed said, his hands settling on Love Angel's shoulders as they both looked at her reflection in the mirror. "She survived the Great Depression by helping other families when she barely had enough for her own. She would have loved you." The drive to the downtown hotel where the gala was being held passed in comfortable conversation, with Reed telling her about the children's hospital wing that tonight's funds would help complete. His passion for helping others, especially children, shone through every word, and Love Angel found herself falling even deeper for this man who used his wealth and influence to make the world better. "I should warn you," Reed said as they pulled up to the hotel's elegantly lit entrance. "There will probably be photographers, and definitely people who will be curious about you. Vincent Sterling, my business partner, and his wife Camilla will be there. They're good people, and I think you'll like them. But there are others who, well, let's just say that some members of Seattle's social scene can be less than welcoming to newcomers." Love Angel felt a flutter of nervousness. Maybe this was a mistake. "I don't know anything about navigating high society events. What if I embarrass you?" Reed turned to face her fully, his eyes serious and intense. "Love Angel, listen to me carefully. You could never embarrass me. You're the most gracious, intelligent, compassionate woman I've ever known. Anyone who doesn't see that isn't worth your time or consideration." The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, with thousands of twinkling lights, cascading floral arrangements, and tables set with crystal and gold that caught the light from enormous chandeliers. Love Angel had never seen anything so magnificent, and for a moment she felt overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of it all. "Breathe," Reed murmured in her ear, his hand warm and steady at the small of her back. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." The first hour passed in a whirlwind of introductions and small talk. Vincent Sterling proved to be as warm and genuine as Red had promised, a man in his 40s with laugh lines around his eyes and an obvious affection for his business partner. His wife Camilla was elegant and kind, immediately drawing Love Angel into conversation about her nursing background and expressing genuine interest in her experiences working with children. "You know," Camilla said during a quiet moment while the men were discussing business. I haven't seen Red this happy in years. There's a light in his eyes when he looks at you that's been missing since Isabella died. Love Angel felt her cheeks warm. It's not what you think. I work for him, taking care of Paul. Camilla's smile was knowing and gentle. My dear, I've seen the way that man looks at babysitters and nannies. That's not how he looks at you. Before Love Angel could respond, the orchestra began playing, and couples started moving toward the dance floor. Red appeared at her side as if summoned, extending his hand with a smile that made her heart skip. May I have this dance? The song was At Last by Etta James, and as Red drew her into his arms on the dance floor, Love Angel felt like she was living inside a dream. He was an excellent dancer, leading her with confident grace as they moved together in perfect harmony. You're trembling, he observed softly, his lips close to her ear. I'm nervous, she admitted. Everyone is watching us. Let them watch, Red said, spinning her gently before drawing her close again. They're seeing what I see, the most beautiful woman in the room, dancing with the luckiest man alive. As the music swelled around them, Love Angel found herself lost in Reed's eyes, in the warmth of his hands, in the feeling that this was exactly where she belonged. For the first time in her adult life, she felt cherished, protected, desired for all the right reasons. Love Angel, Red said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, I'm falling in love with you. The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm, and Love Angel felt her world tilt on its axis. Before she could respond, a cold voice cut through the music like a knife. Well, what do we have here? They turned to see a woman approaching, tall, blonde, and beautiful in the way that spoke of expensive surgeries and exclusive spa treatments. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass, and her eyes held the kind of calculated malice that Love Angel recognized all too well. Vivian, Red said, his voice carefully neutral. How nice to see you. I'll just bet it is, Vivian Hartwell replied, her gaze raking over Love Angel with undisguised disdain. Though I have to say, Red, I'm surprised to see you here with someone so... She paused deliberately, letting her meaning hang in the air. Unexpected. Love Angel felt heat crawl up her neck, but before she could speak, Red stepped slightly in front of her, his protective instincts clearly activated. Love Angel is my guest, he said firmly, and she's more welcome here than most. Oh, I'm sure she is, Vivian said with false sweetness, though I do wonder what the hospital board would think about their largest donor bringing a... What was it you used to do, dear? A nurse? How quaint. Her smile was razor sharp. You know, word travels fast in our circles, especially when someone new appears on Reed's arm. I made a few phone calls after seeing the photos in the society pages. The dismissive tone, the deliberate way Vivian made her profession sound like something shameful, brought back every insecurity that Love Angel had been fighting. She felt small again, worthless like the damaged goods that Damien had always told her she was. But then Reed's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts, cold as winter steel and twice as sharp. This woman has more class and dignity in her little finger than you have in your entire body, Vivian. She's dedicated her life to helping children, to healing and caring for others. She's survived challenges that would have broken weaker people and come through it with her compassion intact. So yes, she's a nurse, one of the most honorable professions in the world, and she's also the most extraordinary woman I've ever had the privilege to know. The ballroom had gone quiet around them, and Love Angel realized that Reed's passionate defense had drawn the attention of nearby guests. Vivian's face had gone white, then red, her composure cracking under the weight of his words. You were just leaving, Rad said, his tone brooking no argument. "And if I hear that you've said one disparaging word about Love Angel to anyone, ever, you'll find that your husband's construction company will have a very difficult time getting permits for future projects." Vivian fled without another word, leaving Love Angel staring at Red in amazement. In that moment, he wasn't just the successful businessman or the grieving widower or even the devoted father. He was her champion, her protector, the man who saw her worth when she couldn't see it herself. "Reed," she whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "Let's get some air," he said gently, leading her toward the terrace doors. The hotel's terrace overlooked the Seattle skyline, the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The cool night air was a relief after the intensity of the ballroom, and Love Angel took several deep breaths, trying to process everything that had just happened. "I'm sorry about Vivian," Reed said, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "She's always been jealous and petty, but tonight she outdid herself." "Why did you do that?" Love Angel asked, turning to face him. "Why did you defend me like that? Now everyone will know that that I what?" Reed asked, stepping closer. "That I care about you. That I think you're incredible. That I'm proud to be seen with you." Love Angel felt her walls, the ones she'd spent years building to protect herself from exactly this kind of vulnerability, beginning to crumble completely. "Reed, earlier, when you said you were falling in love with me, I meant every word," he said without hesitation. "I know it's complicated. I know you're still healing from what Damien put you through. I know the situation with Aspen makes everything harder. But I also know that I haven't felt truly alive since Isabella died. Not until that night I found you in the rain." The space between them seemed to shrink until Love Angel could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count every one of his heartbeats in the pulse point at his throat. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he admitted. "Terrified, actually. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." When he cupped her face in his hands, Love Angel felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to either fall or fly. When his lips touched hers, soft and questioning at first, then deeper as she melted into him, she discovered she could do both. The kiss was everything she dreamed it would be and more, tender yet passionate, desperate yet patient, full of promise and possibility. It tasted like hope and felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Red rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Love Angel," he said simply. "I love your strength, your kindness, your beautiful heart. I love the way you make Paul laugh and the way you make this house feel like a home again. I love your scars because they're proof of what you've survived. I love everything about you." Love Angel felt tears streaming down her cheeks, but for the first time in longer than she could remember, they were tears of joy rather than sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling like a revelation. "I didn't think I was capable of loving anyone again, but you make me want to believe in forever." As they stood together on the terrace, the sounds of the gala continuing behind them, and the city spread out before them like a carpet of light, Love Angel finally understood what her grandmother had meant all those years ago. Love really could conquer all. Sometimes it just took a storm to wash away everything that wasn't meant to last, leaving only what was strong enough to weather any season. And this love, this beautiful, impossible, healing love, was built to last forever. Chapter 6. Breaking Down the Last Walls. The days following the gala passed in a haze of stolen glances, gentle touches, and conversations that stretched long into the night. Love Angel and Reed had crossed a line that night on the terrace, spoken words that couldn't be taken back, and now they were navigating the delicate terrain between declaration and commitment, between love confessed and love fully realized. Love Angel found herself caught between euphoria and terror. During the day, when she watched Red with Paul or caught him looking at her with eyes full of wonder and affection, she felt like she was living in a fairy tale. But in the quiet moments, late at night when sleep eluded her, or in the early morning before the house stirred to life, doubt crept in like fog, whispering that this was too good to be true, that she was too broken for a man like Red, that eventually he would see her as clearly as Damien had and realize his mistake. This particular evening found her in the library, one of her favorite rooms in the mansion. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with first editions and classics, and a fireplace cast dancing shadows across the Persian rugs. She was curled in one of the leather armchairs, supposedly reading but actually lost in thought, when Red appeared in the doorway. "Hiding?" he asked gently, and she looked up to find him leaning against the doorframe, still in his work clothes, but with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, a look that never failed to make her pulse quicken. "Thinking," she replied, closing the book she hadn't been reading anyway. Red crossed the room and settled into the chair beside hers, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Long day?" "Board meeting ran late," he said, rubbing his temples. "We're finalizing the plans for the new children's hospital wing, the one the gala funds will help build." Love Angel felt a warm flutter in her chest. This was one of the things she loved most about Red, his genuine commitment to using his wealth and influence to help others. "Tell me about it," she said, and meant it. Red's eyes lit up as he described the plans: state-of-the-art equipment, family rooms designed to comfort parents during long hospital stays, a healing garden where children could play and find moments of joy even during treatment. As he spoke, Love Angel found herself imagining working in such a place, using her nursing skills to help the families who would benefit from Red's generosity. "I've been thinking," Red said suddenly, his voice careful and hopeful, "about your nursing career. I know you've been taking those online courses, but what if you could do more?" Love Angel felt her defenses rise automatically. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we could help you get back into nursing properly? Full certification, maybe even a degree if you wanted. The hospital wing will need staff when it opens and—" "Stop," Love Angel said, standing up abruptly. "Just stop." Red looked startled by her sudden change in mood. "Love Angel, what's wrong? I thought you'd be excited about the possibility of what? Of you buying me a career like you bought me these clothes and this jewelry?" The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but now that they were spoken, she couldn't take them back. "Is that what this is? Another project for you to fix?" Red stood as well, confusion and hurt evident in his expression. "That's not what I meant at all. You thought you could rescue the poor broken nurse and transform her into something acceptable for your world," Love Angel said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Well, I have news for you, Red. I'm not Isabella. I'm not from your world. I never will be, and no amount of money or education is going to change that fundamental truth." "Where is this coming from?" Red asked, his voice gentle despite the obvious pain in his eyes. "Love Angel, you know that's not how I see you." But Love Angel was spiraling now, all her fears and insecurities crashing over her like a tidal wave. "Don't I? Then why are you so eager to change me? Why can't I just be Love Angel, the babysitter who you found in the rain? Why do I have to become something more impressive?" "Because you are something more impressive," Red said, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself and took a deep breath. "Love Angel, you're a trained nurse. You have skills and knowledge and passion for helping people. I'm not trying to change you. I'm trying to help you reclaim what was taken from you." "By who?" "By you. By adding me to your collection of charity cases?" Love Angel felt tears threatening, but she was too far gone to stop now. Maybe Damien was right. Maybe I am just someone who finds men to take care of me. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she'd gone too far. Red's face went white, and she saw something die in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or the belief that they could build something real together despite the obstacles. "Is that really what you think?" he asked quietly. "After everything, after these weeks together, after Paul has come to love you like a mother, after I've opened my heart to you in ways I never thought I could again, you think I see you as a charity case?" Love Angel wanted to take it all back, to throw herself into his arms and apologize for the fear that was making her lash out at the person who meant everything to her. But the voice in her head, Damien's voice, the voice of every person who had ever made her feel worthless, was louder than her heart. "I don't know what I think anymore," she whispered. Reed stood there for a long moment, looking at her like she was a stranger. Then he nodded slowly, his expression closing off in a way that broke her heart. "I think," he said carefully, "that maybe you need some time to figure that out." He left the library without another word, and Love Angel collapsed back into the chair, sobbing as she realized what she'd just done. She'd taken the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to her and destroyed it with her own fear. The next morning, Red was distant but polite, treating her with the same courteous consideration he might show any employee. Paul, sensitive to the changed atmosphere, kept looking between them with confused, worried eyes, but neither adult offered explanations for the sudden chill that had settled over the household. Love Angel threw herself into her work with Paul, helping him with his homework, playing games, reading stories, anything to avoid the long stretches of silence when she might have to confront what she'd done. But even Paul seemed to sense that something was wrong. "Miss Love Angel," he said one afternoon as they worked on a puzzle together, "are you and Daddy fighting?" Love Angel's hands stilled on the puzzle pieces. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Daddy looks sad again, like he did after Mommy died. And you look sad too, and you don't smile at each other anymore." The innocent observation hit Love Angel like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of babes came truths that adults spent lifetimes trying to avoid. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "grown-ups have disagreements about important things." "But you still love each other, right?" Paul asked with the straightforward logic of childhood. "Because love is supposed to be stronger than fighting." Before Love Angel could answer, Mrs. Valencia appeared in the doorway, her face grave. "Miss Love Angel, there's a phone call for you." "It's from a Diana Foster. She says she's your social worker from the custody case." Love Angel's blood turned to ice. Diana Foster was the social worker handling Aspen's case, and Love Angel had updated her contact information to include Reed's home number when she'd moved in, as required by the court. Diana never called unless something was wrong, or unless something had changed. She took the call in Red's study, her hands shaking as she lifted the receiver. "Diana, what's wrong? Is Aspen okay?" "Love Angel, I have some news." Diana's voice was carefully neutral. "Damien has filed a motion to relocate with Aspen. He's claiming a job opportunity in New York and requesting permission to move there permanently with the child." The room seemed to tilt around Love Angel. "He can't do that. There has to be something." "There might be," Diana interrupted. "The court is going to review the case, and they'll be looking at all factors, including your current living situation and stability. The fact that you're employed and have stable housing will work in your favor. But Damien has also filed allegations claiming that you're in an inappropriate relationship with your employer, that you're using your position to gain financial advantage. He's painting a picture of you as unstable and opportunistic." Love Angel sank into Reed's desk chair, feeling like the world was crashing down around her. "When is the hearing?" 2 weeks. "Love Angel, I need to ask. Is there any truth to his allegations about your relationship with Mr. Brown? Love Angel thought about the gala, about the kiss on the terrace, about the love confession that now seemed like a lifetime ago. It's complicated, she whispered. Well, you need to uncomplicate it quickly, Diana said bluntly. Because if the court believes that you're romantically involved with your employer, it could seriously damage your case. The perception that you're using relationships for financial gain will only support Damien's narrative. After hanging up, Love Angel sat in the study for a long time, staring at the family photos on Red's desk, pictures of him with Isabella, with baby Paul, the three of them looking like the perfect family they'd been before tragedy struck. She thought about her fight with Reed the night before, about the walls she'd built up just when he was trying to tear them down. Maybe this was for the best. Maybe the universe was telling her that she'd been living in a fantasy, that people like her didn't get fairy tale endings. That evening, she found Red in the kitchen, making dinner while Paul set the table. The domestic scene was so perfect, so much like what she dreamed of having with Aspen someday, that it nearly broke her resolve. "Reed, can I talk to you?" He looked up from the stove, his expression carefully neutral. Of course. Privately. They stepped onto the terrace where just days ago they'd shared their first kiss, where the world had seemed full of infinite possibility. Now, under the same stars, Love Angel prepared to end the most beautiful chapter of her life. Diana Foster called today, she began, and saw Reed's expression immediately shift to concern. What did she say? Love Angel told him about the court hearing, about Damien's allegations, about the impossible choice she was facing. With each word, she watched Red's face grow more determined, more ready to fight. "We'll get the best lawyers," he said immediately. "We'll fight this together. Whatever Damien is planning." "No," Love Angel interrupted. "We won't." Red stared at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Damien is right about one thing. My relationship with you, whatever it is, makes me look exactly like what he's always said I am. A woman who uses men for financial security. That's not true, and you know it." "It doesn't matter what's true," Love Angel said, her voice breaking. "It matters what a judge will believe, and a judge will see a homeless nurse who moved in with a millionaire and wonder what she's really after." Red stepped closer, his eyes blazing with determination. "Then we'll prove them wrong. We'll show them that what we have is real, that it's love." "We can't," Love Angel whispered, "because I can't lose Aspen. He's all I have left of the person I used to be before everything went wrong. And if being with you costs me my son, then I can't be with you." The silence that followed was deafening. Love Angel could see the exact moment when Red understood what she was saying, could watch his heart break in real time. "So that's it?" he asked quietly. "You're choosing Damien's manipulation over what we have?" "I'm choosing my son over everything else," Love Angel said, and she knew the words were necessary even as they destroyed them both. "I have to." Red nodded slowly, his expression becoming the mask of polite distance she'd seen him wear in business meetings. "I understand, and you're right. Aspen has to come first." "Reed, when is the hearing?" 2 weeks. "Then we have 2 weeks to prepare the best possible case for you," Red said, his voice businesslike despite the pain in his eyes. "I'll contact my legal team first thing in the morning. We'll make sure you have the strongest representation possible." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Red said firmly. "Because regardless of what happens between us, you deserve to have your son back. And I'm going to make sure that happens, even if—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Love Angel heard the words anyway. "Even if it costs us everything." As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the house settle around her, Love Angel wondered if doing the right thing was supposed to feel like dying inside. She was about to find out. Chapter 7. The Storm Before Peace. The courthouse in downtown Seattle loomed before them like a fortress of judgment, its granite columns and imposing facade speaking of decisions that could change lives with the strike of a gavel. Love Angel sat in the passenger seat of Red's Bentley, her hands twisted in her lap, wearing a conservative navy suit that Rebecca Chen, Rad's attorney, had helped her select for maximum respectability. 2 weeks had passed since their heartbreaking conversation on the terrace, 2 weeks of painful politeness and careful distance. Red had kept his word, assembling a legal team that would have been impressive even by his standards, but the cost had been their relationship. They moved around each other like strangers now, their interactions limited to discussions about the case and logistics for Paul's care. Paul, sweet, perceptive Paul, had tried repeatedly to bridge the gap between them, asking innocent questions about why Daddy and Miss Love Angel didn't smile anymore, why they didn't sit together during his bedtime stories, why the house felt sad even though nobody had died. His confusion was perhaps the most heartbreaking casualty of their necessary separation. "Are you ready?" Reed asked, his voice carefully neutral as he parked the car. Love Angel nodded, not trusting her voice. She hadn't seen Aspen in 10 months. 10 long months of supervised video calls and court-mandated restrictions that broke her heart a little more each day. Today, she would either be one step closer to getting him back, or she would lose him forever to Damien's manipulations. Rebecca Chen met them at the courthouse entrance, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and her expression radiating competent confidence. She'd become Love Angel's lifeline over the past 2 weeks, patient and thorough as she prepared for every possible argument Damien's lawyers might present. "Remember," Rebecca said as they walked through the metal detectors, "answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer additional information, and don't let Damien's attorney bait you into emotional responses. They want to paint you as unstable." The courtroom was smaller than Love Angel had expected, but no less intimidating. Damien sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked like she'd been born to destroy people in legal proceedings. He was immaculate as always, his dark hair perfectly styled, his suit expensive enough to feed a family for months. When their eyes met across the room, his smile was cold and calculating, but it was the sight of Aspen that nearly undid her completely. Her 5-year-old son sat in the front row behind Damien's table, beside a woman Love Angel didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, and obviously wealthy, based on her designer clothes and perfect manicure. This had to be Serena Blackthorne, Damien's new girlfriend and financial backer. Aspen looked uncomfortable in his formal clothes, his dark eyes, so like Love Angel's own, darting around the courtroom with nervous energy. When he spotted her, his face lit up with pure joy. "Mama," he called out, starting to rise from his seat. Serena's hand immediately fell on his shoulder, pressing him back down with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart," she said, in a voice loud enough for the courtroom to hear. "We have to wait for the judge." The possessive way she touched Aspen, the familiar tone she used, made Love Angel's blood boil. This stranger was acting like Aspen's mother, while Love Angel sat across the room, reduced to the role of visitor in her own son's life. Red's hand briefly touched her arm, a fleeting gesture of support that he quickly withdrew, but it was enough to remind her that she wasn't alone in this fight. Judge Patricia Hoffman entered the courtroom with the gravity of someone who understood that her decisions would shape a child's future. She was a woman in her 60s with kind but sharp eyes, known for her fairness but also for her intolerance of legal games when children were involved. Damien's attorney, Miranda Walsh, presented their case first. She painted a picture of a stable, loving home environment, complete with financial security and educational opportunities. She spoke of Damien's successful business ventures, Serena's refinishing influence as a mother figure, and their plan to relocate to New York, where Damien had allegedly been offered a lucrative position. Your Honor, Walsh continued, we have serious concerns about the respondent's current living situation. Ms. Sinclair has been residing with her employer, a Mr. Reed Brown, in what appears to be an inappropriate relationship that blurs professional and personal boundaries. Our investigation suggests that Ms. Sinclair may be using this relationship for financial gain, demonstrating the same pattern of dependency that led to the breakdown of her marriage to my client. Love. Angel felt heat crawl up her neck as Walsh produced photographs, images of her and Red at the gala, dancing together, looking at each other with obvious affection. There were pictures of them on the terrace, though thankfully taken from too far away to show their kiss clearly. These images show a woman who has once again chosen to pursue a relationship with a man for financial security rather than focusing on her own stability and independence. How can we trust someone who repeatedly makes such choices to provide the stable, consistent environment that Aspen needs? When it was Rebecca's turn, she stood with the calm authority of someone who'd fought these battles for decades. Your Honor, what we have here is a classic case of an abusive ex-husband attempting to maintain control over his victim through their shared child. Mr. Voss systematically destroyed Miss Sinclair's financial independence during their marriage, isolated her from support systems, and used emotional and psychological abuse to undermine her confidence. Rebecca presented documentation of Damien's abuse, medical records from an emergency room visit after he'd thrown a glass at Love Angel's head, testimony from her former colleagues about her nursing skills and character, financial records showing how Damien had controlled every aspect of their monetary life. Ms. Sinclair didn't lose custody of Aspen because she was an unfit mother, Rebecca continued. She lost custody because she had been systematically stripped of the resources needed to provide for him. Mr. Brown didn't rescue Ms. Sinclair. He simply gave her the opportunity to rebuild her life and reclaim her independence. And what is the nature of Miss Sinclair's relationship with Mr. Brown? Judge Hoffman asked. Rebecca had prepared Love Angel for this question, had coached her on how to answer truthfully while protecting both her case and Reed's reputation. Ms. Sinclair is employed by Mr. Brown as caregiver and tutor for his 7-year-old son. While they have developed a personal friendship, their relationship remains appropriate and professional. The lie tasted bitter in Love Angel's mouth, but she understood its necessity. Any admission of romantic involvement would give Damien exactly the ammunition he needed. When Love Angel was called to testify, her legs felt like water as she walked to the witness stand. She could feel every eye in the courtroom on her. But it was Aspen's gaze that gave her strength. Her son was watching her with the intensity of a child who understood that his entire future hung in the balance. Under Rebecca's gentle questioning, Love Angel spoke about her nursing career, her love for children, her commitment to providing Aspen with a stable, loving home. She described the gradual erosion of her confidence and independence during her marriage to Damien, the way he had systematically isolated her from friends and family, controlled their finances, and used psychological manipulation to make her doubt her own worth. I made mistakes, she said, her voice strong despite the tears threatening to fall. I stayed too long in a marriage that was destroying me. I let my ex-husband convince me that I was worthless, that I couldn't survive without him. But I never stopped loving my son, never stopped fighting to become the mother he deserves. When Walsh cross-examined her, the attorney went straight for the jugular. Miss Sinclair, you testified that you're employed by Mr. Brown as a caregiver. What are your qualifications for this position? I have training as a pediatric nurse, and I've been caring for children. But you lost your nursing license, didn't you? It lapsed when I couldn't afford the continuing education requirements. Because you had no income. Because my ex-husband controlled all our finances and refused to pay for my professional development. Walsh smiled coldly. or because you chose to depend on a man rather than maintain your own career independence. Isn't it true that you've now made the same choice again with Mr. Brown? No, that's not. You live in his house, wear clothes he provides, attend social events as his companion. How is this situation different from your marriage to my client? Love Angel felt the trap closing around her, felt her carefully constructed defense beginning to crumble under Walsh's relentless attack. Mr. Brown has helped me rebuild my life, but I'm working toward independence by engaging in a romantic relationship with your employer. Objection, Rebecca called out, but the damage was already done. I'll allow it, Judge Hoffman said. Miss Sinclair, please answer the question. Love Angel looked across the courtroom at Red, saw the pain in his eyes as they both faced the impossible choice between truth and Aspen's future. There is no romantic relationship, she said, the words falling like stones into her heart. But Walsh wasn't finished. Your Honor, we have additional evidence to present. She produced a thick folder, and Love Angel's blood turned to ice as she recognized some of the contents. Photographs that could only have been taken with a telephoto lens, showing intimate moments between her and Reed that she hadn't even known were being observed. These images were taken over the past month by a private investigator hired by my client. They show Ms. Sinclair and Mr. Brown in what can only be described as romantic encounters, holding hands, embracing, sharing intimate conversations. This is clearly more than an employer-employee relationship. The photographs were damning. Red helping her from the car with his hand lingering on her waist, the two of them talking intensely on the terrace, their body language speaking of intimacy and connection that went far beyond professional courtesy. Love Angel watched her carefully constructed defense collapse like a house of cards. She could see the disappointment in Judge Hoffman's eyes, could feel Aspen's confused gaze boring into her from across the room. Your Honor, Rebecca said, rising to object, but Judge Hoffman held up a hand. I've seen enough for today. We'll reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments and my decision. As the courtroom began to empty, Love Angel sat frozen in her chair, staring at the evidence of her happiness spread across the defendant's table like accusations. She had lost. Damien had won again, using her own feelings against her, just as he always had. Red appeared beside her, his face gray with understanding. Love Angel, don't, she whispered, just don't. But as they walked out of the courthouse together, Damien intercepted them in the hallway, Serena beside him and Aspen clinging to her hand like a lifeline. Angel, Damien said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of false concern. I'm sorry it had to come to this, but surely you can see that Aspen needs stability, consistency. You can't provide that while you're playing house with your latest benefactor. He's my son, Love Angel said, her voice breaking. He's our son, Damien corrected, and I'm doing what's best for him. What do you want? Reed asked suddenly, his voice deadly quiet. Damien smiled. I want what I've always wanted, what's best for my family. But I understand that Love Angel has financial difficulties. Perhaps we could work out an arrangement. A significant contribution to Aspen's future, say $500,000, might help me reconsider the relocation. The audacity of it, the blatant extortion, hit Love Angel like a physical blow. You're trying to sell my son. I'm trying to secure his future, Damien replied smoothly. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to say goodbye permanently. Love Angel looked at Aspen, who was watching this exchange with the wide, frightened eyes of a child caught in adult machinations he couldn't understand. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. I'll get you the money, she said. Red grabbed her arm. Love Angel, no, don't let him. I'll get you the money, she repeated, her voice stronger. But I want my son back, all of him, full custody. Damien's smile widened. I'm afraid that's not how this works, Angel. The money buys you visitation rights, generous ones, of course. Then no deal, Love Angel said, surprising everyone, including herself. If you want to take my son across the country, if you want to steal him from me completely, then you'll have to do it without my money or my cooperation. I won't pay you to break my heart. For the first time, Damien's confident facade cracked slightly. He hadn't expected resistance, hadn't counted on Love Angel finding her backbone at this crucial moment. Fine, he said coldly. Then I'll see you in court tomorrow, Angel. And when you lose, because you will lose, remember that you chose pride over your son. As Damien led Aspen away, Love Angel felt something inside her break completely. But it wasn't her spirit. It was the last chain of fear that had bound her to her abuser for so long. Standing in that courthouse hallway with Red beside her and her future hanging in the balance, Love Angel finally understood what her grandmother had meant about angels. Sometimes you had to fall before you could learn to fly. And tomorrow, she was going to soar. Chapter 8. Love Conquers All. The night before the final hearing was the longest of Love Angel's life. She stood at her bedroom window, watching the lake reflect the moonlight like scattered diamonds, knowing that in a few hours, a judge would decide whether she would spend the rest of her life fighting for scraps of time with her son, or if she would somehow, miraculously, get the chance to be his mother again. Her suitcases sat packed by the door, not because she was planning to leave win or lose, but because she had finally made peace with the possibility that loving someone might mean letting them go. If Red's reputation or Paul's happiness was threatened by her presence, she would disappear before she'd let them suffer for her mistakes. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called softly. Paul appeared in the doorway, his pajamas rumpled and his hair sticking up in all directions. He was clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the one Reed had bought him after Isabella's death to help with nightmares. "I can't sleep," he said simply. Love Angel opened her arms and he ran to her, climbing into her lap as she settled into the window seat. For several minutes, they simply held each other, watching the moonlight dance on the water. "Miss Love Angel," Paul said finally, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "Are you going to leave us?" The question broke her heart because it came from a child who had already lost too much, who understood abandonment in ways no 7-year-old should. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, smoothing his hair. "I don't want to leave you. Not ever." "But you might have to." Love Angel thought about lying, about offering false reassurances that would make him feel better in the moment. But Paul deserved the truth, or as much of it as his young heart could handle. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "grown-ups have to make really hard choices about what's best for the people they love. Your daddy and I both love you more than anything in the world, and sometimes love means doing things that hurt if it means protecting someone you care about." Paul pulled back to look at her with those perceptive blue eyes that were so much like Reed's. "Do you love my daddy?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, like a test of honesty that would determine everything that came after. Love Angel thought about all the careful lies she'd told in court, all the ways she'd hidden her heart to protect her case. "Yes," she whispered, "I love your daddy very much." "And he loves you too," Paul said with the certainty of childhood. "I can tell because he looks at you the same way he used to look at Mommy, and because he's been sad again since you stopped smiling at each other." "It's complicated, baby." "No, it's not," Paul interrupted with startling firmness. "Love isn't complicated. Grown-ups just make it complicated because they're scared." Out of the mouths of babes came wisdom that Love Angel had been too afraid to acknowledge. "You're right," she said. "We are scared." "Of what?" "Of getting hurt. Of losing people we care about. Of not being good enough." Paul considered this with the gravity of someone twice his age. "But Miss Love Angel, If you never try because you're scared, then you lose them anyway, right? At least, if you try, you might get to keep them. Love Angel felt tears streaming down her cheeks as this beautiful, wise child offered her the courage she'd been searching for. When did you get so smart? Daddy says I get it from Mommy, Paul said matter-of-factly. She used to tell him that love was like planting a garden. You can't be afraid of storms because that's how flowers grow. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, Seattle's signature weather providing a fitting backdrop for what could be Love Angel's last day as a real mother to Aspen. She dressed with meticulous care in the same navy suit, armor for a battle she still might lose despite her newfound resolve. Red was waiting in the kitchen when she came downstairs, 2 cups of coffee steaming on the counter. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his usually perfect hair mussed and exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. I wanted to talk to you before we left, he said without preamble. Love Angel accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Read about yesterday, about everything I said in court. I know why you said it, he interrupted. And I understand. You're protecting Aspen, and you're right to do that. But I'm tired of lying, Love Angel said, the words rushing out before she could stop them. I'm tired of pretending that what we have isn't real, isn't worth fighting for. Paul reminded me last night that you can't grow flowers without storms. Red's eyes searched her face, hope flickering in their depths. What are you saying? I'm saying that I love you, that I've been in love with you since that night you found me in the rain, probably before I was brave enough to admit it to myself. And I'm saying that if we lose today, if the worst happens, I want you to know that loving you, even for this short time, has been the most beautiful thing that's ever happened to me. Red set down his coffee cup and crossed to her in 2 quick strides, cupping her face in his hands. Love Angel, I'm not finished, she said, placing her hands over his. I'm also saying that I trust you. Whatever happens in that courtroom today, whatever the judge decides, I trust you to help me figure out what comes next. Together. Together, Reed repeated, and then he was kissing her, desperate and passionate and full of promises that neither of them could guarantee they'd be able to keep. They were interrupted by Mrs. Valencia, clearing her throat pointedly from the doorway. Mr. Reed, Miss Love Angel, there's someone here to see you. Jake Morrison, the private investigator Rebecca had hired, stood in the foyer with a thick manila envelope and an expression of grim satisfaction. I think you're going to want to see this before court, he said. An hour later, Love Angel sat in the courthouse bathroom, staring at herself in the fluorescent-lit mirror and trying to process everything Jake had discovered. Financial records showing that Damien's job opportunity in New York was actually a business venture financed by Serena, who was using her family's money to help him relocate, specifically to keep Aspen away from Love Angel. Phone records revealing conversations between Damien and the private investigator he'd hired, including instructions to get pictures that would make the mother look unfit, whatever it takes. Most damning of all were the recordings Jake had obtained. Conversations between Damien and Serena in which they discussed their long-term plan to cut Love Angel out of Aspen's life completely, with Serena eventually adopting the child once they were safely across the country. He's been planning this for months, Rebecca explained as they reviewed the evidence one final time. The job offer, the move, even the relationship with Serena. It's all been orchestrated to take Aspen away from you permanently. The courtroom was packed when they returned, word having somehow spread that this custody case involved more than just a simple relocation request. Love Angel spotted several familiar faces in the gallery, Mrs. Valencia, Vincent, and Camilla Sterling, even some of the nurses from her old hospital who had somehow learned about the hearing and come to show support. Judge Hoffman entered with the same grave demeanor as the day before, But Love Angel thought she detected something different in the older woman's expression, a sharpness that suggested she didn't appreciate being manipulated. Rebecca stood to address the court, her voice carrying the confidence of someone holding all the winning cards. "Your Honor, new evidence has come to light that we believe is crucial to this case." For the next hour, Rebecca systematically dismantled Damien's carefully constructed narrative. She presented the financial records showing the fraudulent nature of his job offer, played excerpts from the recorded conversations, and demonstrated how every aspect of his relocation request was designed to permanently separate a child from his mother. Damien's attorney tried to object, tried to claim the evidence was illegally obtained, but Jake Morrison had been meticulous in his investigation, ensuring that everything was gathered through legitimate means. When Damien was called to the stand for further questioning, Love Angel watched the man who had terrorized her for years slowly lose his composure under Rebecca's methodical questioning. At first, he maintained his calm demeanor, but as each lie was exposed with documentation, his responses became more defensive. "Mr. Voss, did you or did you not tell Ms. Blackthorne that you intended to cut Angel out of Aspen's life permanently once we're safely in New York?" That's taken out of context. It's a simple yes or no question, Mr. Voss. Damien's mask began to slip. "Fine, yes, but you don't understand the situation." "Mr. Voss," Rebecca continued relentlessly, "is it true that the job opportunity in New York is actually a business venture financed entirely by Ms. Blackthorne's family money?" That's not relevant to Aspen's welfare. Please answer the question." By the time Rebecca had finished her cross-examination, Damien was visibly agitated, his careful facade cracking under the weight of documented evidence. When Rebecca presented the final recording, his voice clearly stating his intention to make Love Angel disappear from Aspen's life forever, Damien's control finally snapped. "She's unfit," he finally exploded when Rebecca pressed him about his true motivations. "She's always been unfit. She can't take care of herself, let alone a child. She needs a man to survive, and now she's latched onto this rich guy just like she latched onto me." "Mr. Voss," Judge Hoffman said sharply, "you will control yourself in my courtroom." But Damien was past caring about courtroom decorum. "You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been planning to take Aspen away from her permanently. Yes, I've been using every resource at my disposal to make sure she never gets him back. Because she doesn't deserve him. She's weak, she's pathetic, and my son deserves better than to be raised by someone who—" "That's enough," Judge Hoffman said, her voice cutting through Damien's tirade like a blade. "Mr. Voss, you will sit down and remain silent, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." In the stunned silence that followed, Love Angel felt something shift in the atmosphere. Damien had just shown the court exactly who he really was, not the concerned father he'd pretended to be, but an abusive man determined to maintain control at any cost. When Judge Hoffman called a recess to review the new evidence, Love Angel found herself in the hallway face-to-face with Aspen for the first time since the previous day. Serena had apparently decided that distance was no longer necessary, perhaps sensing that their carefully laid plans were falling apart. "Mama," Aspen said, breaking away from Serena's grip and running to Love Angel's arms. She knelt down and gathered him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, feeling his small arms wrap around her neck with desperate strength. "Oh, baby," she whispered, "I've missed you so much." "I missed you too, Mama. Are you going to take me home now?" Love Angel's throat tightened with emotion. "I hope so, sweetheart. I hope so." When court reconvened, Judge Hoffman's expression was grave but determined. "I have reviewed all evidence presented in this case, and I have some things to say about what I've observed. Mr. Voss, your behavior in this courtroom today combined with the evidence of deception and manipulation presented by Ms. Sinclair's counsel, has shown me a man more concerned with control than with his child's welfare. The court finds that your request for relocation is not in Aspen's best interests and is therefore denied. Love Angel felt her heart stop, afraid to hope too much too soon. Furthermore, Judge Hoffman continued, given the evidence of your systematic attempts to alienate the child from his mother, I am modifying the existing custody arrangement. Miss Sinclair, effective immediately, you are awarded primary physical custody of your son, with Mr. Voss receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Damien was on his feet, shouting about appeals and injustice. Serena looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe their perfect plan had collapsed so completely. And Aspen, sweet Aspen, was looking between his parents with the confused hope of a child who just wanted his family to be whole again. But Love Angel only had eyes for Reed, who was watching her with such joy and pride that she thought her heart might burst from the sheer overwhelming rightness of the moment. She had won. Against all odds, despite every obstacle Damien had placed in her path, she had won. As the judge's gavel fell and the official proceedings ended, Love Angel found herself surrounded by people offering congratulations and support. But through the crowd, she could see Red waiting patiently, Paul beside him, both of them beaming with happiness for her victory. When she finally reached them, Paul threw himself into her arms while Reed stood back, letting her have this moment with the children who had become her world. Miss Love Angel, does this mean you and Aspen are going to live with us forever? Paul asked with the straightforward hope of childhood. Love Angel looked at Reed over Paul's head, seeing her own love reflected in his eyes. I think, she said carefully, that depends on whether your daddy wants us to. Reed stepped closer, gathering both children and Love Angel into his arms. I can't think of anything I want more, he said simply. Standing there in the courthouse hallway, surrounded by the family they'd chosen to build together, Love Angel finally understood what her grandmother had meant about angels bringing love to broken worlds. Sometimes the broken world that needed saving was your own. Chapter 9, Building Forever. 6 months had passed since the courthouse victory that changed everything, and the Brown Mansion had transformed from a house of quiet elegance into a home filled with the chaotic joy of childhood laughter. Aspen had settled into his new life with the resilience that children possess, bonding with Paul like the brother he'd always wanted, and treating Red with the cautious affection of a boy, learning to trust a good man after years of his father's unpredictable temperament. Love Angel stood in the garden behind the house, watching her 2 sons chase each other through the sprinkler system, while Mrs. Valencia called out warnings about muddy clothes that neither boy heeded. The sight never failed to fill her with overwhelming gratitude, not just for the victory that had reunited her with Aspen, but for the family that had embraced them both with such complete acceptance. Penny for your thoughts. She turned to find Red approaching, his sleeves rolled up and his tie loosened after another long day at Brown Tech Industries. But his eyes were bright with anticipation, and she could see he was carrying something behind his back. Just thinking about how much has changed, she said, moving into his arms for the embrace that had become as natural as breathing. 6 months ago, I was sleeping on a park bench in the rain. Now, ... Now you're home, Red finished simply, and the word carried weight beyond its simple definition. Home wasn't just this beautiful house or even the city of Seattle. Home was wherever they were together, wherever Paul and Aspen could grow up feeling safe and loved. What are you hiding? Love Angel asked, noticing his secretive smile. Actually, I need to ask you something important, Red said, and suddenly the playful atmosphere shifted into something more serious, more meaningful. But first, I need some help from my assistants. He whistled sharply, and both boys came running, their clothes soaked and their faces shining with happiness. "Boys, remember what we talked about?" Paul nodded seriously while Aspen bounced on his toes with barely contained excitement. It was remarkable how quickly the two children had bonded, Paul taking his role as big brother with grave responsibility, while Aspen hero-worshipped his older sibling with complete devotion. "Miss Love Angel," Paul said formally, "we have something very important to ask you." Aspen giggled and covered his mouth with muddy hands, clearly struggling to contain whatever secret he'd been entrusted with. Love Angel felt her heart begin to race as Reed dropped to one knee in the garden, pulling a small velvet box from behind his back. The diamond ring inside caught the late afternoon sunlight and threw rainbows across the grass. But it was the expression on Reed's face, vulnerable, hopeful, absolutely certain, that took her breath away. "Love Angel," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "6 months ago, you walked into my life like an answer to prayers I didn't even know I was praying. You brought laughter back to this house, love back to my heart, and purpose back to my days. You've made Paul happier than I've seen him since his mother died, and you've shown me what it means to love someone completely, without reservation, without fear." Paul stepped forward solemnly. "And we all talked about it, and we decided that we want to be a real family forever and ever. With a wedding and a cake and everything," Aspen added, unable to contain his excitement any longer. Love Angel looked down at the 3 most important people in her world, Red, kneeling before her with such love in his eyes, Paul standing proud and serious beside him, and Aspen practically vibrating with joy. The moment felt surreal, like something from the fairy tales she used to read as a child, but never believed could happen to girls like her. "Love Angel," Reed continued, "will you marry me? Will you let us make this official, make us a family in every way that matters? Will you trust me with your heart, your future, your dreams?" The yes was on her lips before he'd finished speaking, but the words seemed caught in her throat by the sheer overwhelming emotion of the moment. Instead, she dropped to her knees in front of him, framing his face with her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." The ring slipped onto her finger as if it had been made specifically for her hand, which, Reed told her later, it had been. He'd worked with the jeweler for weeks to create something unique. A platinum band with a center diamond surrounded by smaller stones in the shape of angel wings, honoring both her name and the way she'd appeared in his life. Paul and Aspen cheered and threw themselves into the group hug that followed, and Mrs. Valencia appeared from seemingly nowhere with a bottle of champagne and glasses, tears streaming down her own cheeks as she witnessed the family she'd helped nurture finally become complete. The wedding planning began immediately, though not in the elaborate way that Love Angel had once dreamed about as a young girl. This time, she wanted something intimate and meaningful, a celebration of the love they'd found rather than a display of wealth or status. Red, however, had different ideas. "Love Angel," he said one evening as they sat reviewing potential venues, "I know you want something small and private, and if that's what would make you happiest, then that's what we'll do. But I want you to know that you deserve to be celebrated. You deserve a wedding that shows the world how extraordinary you are, how grateful I am to have found you." "I don't need grand gestures," Love Angel protested, though she was touched by his desire to honor her in such a public way. "I know you don't need them," Reed said, taking her hands across the table. "But I need to give them to you. For too long, you were with someone who made you feel small, who convinced you that you didn't deserve beautiful things. I want to spend the rest of my life proving him wrong." In the end, they compromised. The ceremony would be held in the garden of the mansion, overlooking the lake that had become such a special place for them. It would be intimate, fewer than 50 guests, but it would be beautiful, elegant, a proper celebration of the love they'd fought so hard to protect. Love Angel chose a dress that made her feel like the Princess Paul had always insisted she was, flowing ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves and a train that would photograph beautifully against the garden's natural backdrop. Her grandmother's pearl necklace, carefully preserved through all the chaos of her life, would serve as her something old, while Reed's mother's angel wing necklace would be her something borrowed. The guest list was a reflection of the family they'd built from love rather than blood. Mrs. Valencia would walk Love Angel down the aisle, having become more of a mother to her than her own biological family had ever been. Vincent and Camilla Sterling would serve as witnesses, their own marriage a testament to the kind of partnership Love Angel and Reed hoped to build. Rebecca Chen would be there, having become not just an attorney but a friend. Even some of the nurses from Love Angel's old hospital had been invited, women who remembered her kindness and skill and wanted to celebrate her happiness. Paul and Aspen would serve as ring bearers, a role they took so seriously that they practiced walking slowly and solemnly for weeks, though Love Angel suspected they would still run down the aisle when the actual moment came. The night before the wedding, Love Angel lay in her bed, soon to be their bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling around her. Tomorrow, she would officially become Mrs. Reed Brown, would legally claim the family that had already claimed her heart. But more than that, she would be making a promise to trust in love, to believe in forever, to choose hope over fear every single day for the rest of her life. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called softly. Both boys appeared in the doorway, Paul holding Aspen's hand with the protective instinct that had developed between them. "We can't sleep," Paul announced. "We're too excited about tomorrow." "And we wanted to tell you something," Aspen added, climbing onto the bed without invitation, while Paul followed more sedately. Love Angel made room for both boys, pulling them close as they settled on either side of her. "What did you want to tell me?" "We talked about it," Paul said seriously, "and we decided that after tomorrow we're not going to call you Miss Love Angel anymore." "Oh? What are you going to call me?" "Mom," both boys said simultaneously, and Love Angel felt her heart overflow with a joy so complete it was almost painful. "Are you sure?" she asked, thinking of Isabella, of the mother Paul had lost and still remembered with such love. Paul seemed to understand her concern. "Mommy, Isabella will always be my first mom," he said with the wisdom of a child who had learned to hold multiple truths. "But you're going to be my forever mom. Is that okay?" "That's more than okay," Love Angel whispered, holding them both tight. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me." The morning dawned clear and bright, Seattle's famous rain holding off as if the city itself was celebrating their union. Love Angel woke to find fresh flowers on her bedside table, white roses and baby's breath, and a note from Red. "Today we begin forever. I love you beyond words." The hours passed in a blur of preparation, with Mrs. Valencia orchestrating the chaos like a general commanding troops. Hair and makeup were done by professionals Red had hired, but the real transformation came from the joy radiating from Love Angel's face. She had never felt more beautiful, more cherished, more ready to step into the future she'd once thought was impossible. When it was time, she stood at the garden entrance, her hand on Mrs. Valencia's arm, watching the guests rise to their feet. The altar Red had designed was breathtaking, an arch of white roses and greenery framing the lake beyond, with chairs arranged in intimate rows that allowed everyone to feel part of the ceremony. But Love Angel only had eyes for Red, standing at the altar in his black tuxedo with Paul and Aspen beside him, all three of them watching her approach with expressions of such love and joy that she had to blink back tears of happiness. The ceremony itself was perfect in its simplicity. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to heal each other's wounds, protect each other's hearts, and create new dreams together. Red promised to love her in storms and sunshine, in struggles and triumphs, while Love Angel vowed to be his peace, his passion, and his partner in all things. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, when Reed lifted her veil and kissed her with such tenderness that the small crowd erupted in cheers, Love Angel knew that every moment of pain in her past had been worth enduring for this perfect happiness. The reception was intimate and joyful, filled with toasts that celebrated not just their love, but the family they'd created from broken pieces. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife to At Last, the same song they'd danced to at the gala where everything changed, Love Angel felt like she was living inside a dream that was somehow even better than anything she could have imagined. Later, as they stood on the terrace watching their guests mingle and their sons play with other children in the garden, Red pulled her close. "No regrets?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Only one," Love Angel said, and saw concern flicker in his eyes until she smiled. "I regret that it took a storm to bring us together. Think of all the time we could have had." Red laughed, spinning her around as her dress flowed out around them like ivory clouds. "Then we'll just have to make sure the rest of our lives make up for it." As the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that seemed created specifically for their wedding day, Love Angel knew that they would do exactly that. They would build a life together that honored both their scars and their healing, that celebrated the children who had brought them together, and the love that would see them through whatever storms lay ahead. The rain that had nearly destroyed her had delivered her greatest blessing. Now, dancing with her husband while their children played nearby and the people who loved them celebrated their union, Love Angel finally understood the true meaning of her grandmother's prophecy. She had been sent to bring love to a broken world. She just hadn't realized that the broken world was her own. Chapter 10. Heaven on Earth, the Most Beautiful Love. 6 months after their wedding, Love Angel discovered she was pregnant. When she told Red, he lifted her up and spun her around, both crying with joy. "Our love is creating new life," he whispered, his hands on her still flat belly. They had already begun planning the Angel Wings free clinic during their engagement, and now with the pregnancy, they decided to accelerate the timeline. Love Angel worked there part-time while pregnant, glowing with purpose and Reed's love. First tear-jerking scene, the midnight moment. At 8 months pregnant, Love Angel woke at 2 a.m. with severe back pain. Red immediately got up, ran a warm bath, and massaged her back with gentle hands. "My beautiful angel, you're carrying our miracle," he whispered, tears glistening as he felt the baby kick. "When I was little, and my mama, Mary Brown, worked night shifts at the factory, she'd come home bone-tired and still care for me. She died before seeing me succeed, but if she could see me now, caring for the woman I love and our unborn child, she'd know her sacrifices meant everything." Love Angel wept because this millionaire chose to personally tend to her when love was his only priority. "Your mother raised an extraordinary man," she whispered. "Our baby is blessed beyond measure." Red's hands stilled as emotion overwhelmed him. "My mama worked 3 jobs, waitressing, factory shifts, cleaning offices, just so I could have books and dreams of something bigger than our trailer. She never saw me build this company, never met Paul, never knew her sacrifices would lead to this moment, holding the woman who saved my soul while our child grows inside her." Second tear-jerking scene, the clinic's opening. On opening day, Love Angel saw a bruised little girl who reminded her of herself. She broke down in the supply closet, and Red found her sobbing about her childhood. 17 foster homes, cruelty, never feeling worthy of love. "I see myself in these broken children," she cried. "The way they flinch, apologize for existing, don't believe anyone could love them just because they breathe." Red cradled her face, his own tears falling. "And that's exactly why you're their guardian angel. You survived hell to become their beacon of hope." He showed her his childhood photo, a skinny boy in threadbare clothes before a rusted trailer. "We both rose from nothing, baby. My mama and I survived on food stamps. Kids called me trailer trash, but look at us now." He gestured around the beautiful clinic. "Our pain had divine purpose. It led us to each other and to this sacred calling." Third tear-jerking scene, the perfect family moment. When Love Angel went into labor, Reed never left her side through 18 grueling hours. When their daughter, Grace, was born with Love Angel's golden eyes and Reed's auburn hair, both parents wept with overwhelming joy. The most beautiful moment came that night, Reed changing Grace's first diaper while Love Angel watched, glowing. Paul and Aspen peeked around the doorway, mesmerized. "You know, little princess," Red whispered to newborn Grace, "your mama was crying in the rain when I found her, but she wasn't broken. She was just waiting for us to find each other." Grace wrapped tiny fingers around his thumb as his tears fell. "Your daddy loves your mama more than all his wealth, more than anything in this world. Because she taught him that true riches isn't what you have in your bank account, it's what you have in your heart." His voice broke. "My own mama never got to hold a grandchild, never saw me become a father. But I know she's watching from heaven, smiling because her little boy learned to love the way she taught him." Love Angel realized this was pure love, a man willing to wake at 3 a.m. to change diapers because he wanted to, not because he had to. A man who honored his poor mother's memory by being the father and husband she dreamed he could become. The most beautiful, satisfying ending. 6 months later, on the anniversary of the night they met, Red took Love Angel back to that same park bench. Now she held baby Grace while Paul and Aspen played nearby, their perfect blended family. "Do you remember what you were thinking that night?" Red asked. Love Angel smiled, kissing Grace's forehead. "I was thinking my life was over. I had lost everything." Red took her free hand, wedding ring sparkling. "And I was thinking about driving home to an empty house, going through the motions of living without really being alive." Paul ran over, face flushed with happiness. "Dad, tell the story about how you saved Mom in the rain." Red laughed, pulling Paul close while Aspen joined them. "Actually, son, your mom saved me. She taught me that being rich doesn't mean anything without love. She turned a lonely millionaire into the luckiest man alive." Love Angel looked at her family. This incredible man who came from poverty but never lost his heart. These beautiful children who called her mom. This baby girl who represented their eternal love. "I used to think I was unworthy of happiness," she said. "I thought broken people like me didn't get fairy tale endings. But you all showed me that sometimes God breaks us just so he can put us back together in the most beautiful way possible." Grace gurgled happily, reaching tiny fingers toward the streetlight as if trying to catch rain-scattered light. Red stood, lifting Paul and Aspen so they could all fit in one giant family embrace. "You know what, boys?" Red said, his voice full of wonder. "This is where miracles happen. Right here, on this ordinary park bench, in the middle of an ordinary storm, your mom and I found extraordinary love. Come on, family, let's go home." As they walked away from that bench where their love story began, Love Angel took one last look back. The rain that almost destroyed her had actually delivered her greatest blessing. The storm that felt like an ending had really been a beginning. Now, walking hand in hand with Reed while their children ran ahead, and Grace slept peacefully in her arms, She knew she was living proof that love really could conquer everything. Sometimes you had to lose everything to find what mattered most. They entered their warm, love-filled home where Mrs. Valencia had dinner waiting, where every room echoed with laughter, and where two broken souls had found each other and created something beautiful, perfect, and eternal. Outside, it started to rain again, gentle drops that sparkled like blessings in the porch light. But inside there was only warmth, laughter, and the kind of love that makes angels weep with joy. Love Angel was finally, truly home.